Welcome back to Risky Business, a show about making better decisions. I'm Maria Konnikova.
And I'm Nate Silver, and I forgot to bring my audio equipment to Las Vegas, so that's why I look ridiculous if you're watching this on YouTube, holding my phone to my lips. Today we have a special kind of year-end show for you. We're going to be awarding the Riskies. This is our term for awards like Dgen of the Year, Knit of the Year, Tilt of the Year, basically a bunch of awards to people who made extraordinarily good or bad decisions. We're very excited about these.
Yep, and after the Riskies, we're going to be talking a little bit about poker and our own Riskies because Nate and I are both in Las Vegas right now for the WPT series at the Wynn, so we'll talk a little bit about how that's going. And finally, we're actually going to respond to a listener question about bilingualism and does it make sense to learn a second language?
I'm excited.
Nate, I'm really excited for our first of what I hope will be annual Risky Awards, the Riskies, to talk about good and bad decisions of the year in all walks of life. So obviously, we talk a lot about politics on the show, so we'll have some from politics, but also from business and from sports and Hollywood, just talking in general about risky decisions, which ones worked out, which ones didn't, which ones were good, which ones were bad. So let's get started and talk about awarding the first risky to the hero call of the year. So a decision that looked like it might have been a little crazy at the time, but turned out to be brilliant, right? Just like a hero call in poker. When you're thinking, you have jack high, and it's for your tournament life, and you end up calling, and you're right because the other guy was bluffing with 8 high or whatever it was. Nate, do you have a hero call of the year?
I think Theo, the French whale, has to get the hero call of the year award. So what did he make?
Yeah, that's a good one.
$85 billion. So the French whale was on Polymarket, which I'm an advisor to, and bet copious amounts, millions of dollars, I think, into the 9 figures that Trump would win, and kind of even like distorted as a loaded term. But like the whole market was affected by this one trader. Polymarket has good volume, but not. But it's not the equities market or something like that. Apparently did some polling where he asked people who were your neighbors voting for. This technique is not that proven, but look, it worked. A hero call by definition is like, if you get the answer right for lots of money, then you have to get some amount of credit, right? A lot of people didn't have this degree of confidence in the election. Our forecast literally had it more random than a coin flip. And so I'm going to give the French whale, Theo, this award.
I think that's a beautiful answer. Theo absolutely deserves Hero Call of the Year because we even talked on the podcast. We're like, this is insane. Like, right? Who is this whale? Like, what is going on? And yeah, he ended up making a shit ton of money. So congratulations, Theo. You've made our Hero Call of the Year.
Congrats.
Yes.
And come on the show.
Yes, we'd love to talk about how you think about risk.
We.
Nate promises he will not do his French accent for you when you are on the show. All right. So, a flip side of the hero call is when you make the wrong decision, right? What was the worst fold of the year? So a decision that, ended up making people think, what were you thinking? How could you fold there? I have one for this, but yeah, you go ahead. It seems like you're excited about this one.
I'm sorry this is so on brand. I have to go with like the she should have picked Shapiro thing. I know it's very politics heavy, but like you have this very charismatic politician who's like literally the popular governor of the most important swing state, which by the way turned out to be the tipping point state, Pennsylvania, and she picked Tim Walz, who was kind of weird in practice, and like it just seemed like a no-brainer. And I can try and dissect why the campaign did this, but like that's a decision that's kind of the opposite of the hero call, right? It's like the obvious play. If you don't make the obvious play, right? If you have this amazing semi-bluffing opportunity, you have a straight draw and a flush draw, and you have fold equity, and you choose to play the hand differently in some weird way, then it better work out well, or if not, we have the right to criticize you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny. So I'm going to say what I had for this, but there's another award that comes a little bit later, but I'm going to reference it now because I think it's very germane. And it's an award that we're borrowing from the podcast, The Town. So thank you very much, The Town. And it's the Suck It Haters, I Was Right award. And that, Nate, I'm going to give to one of the decisions that you've been talking about all year, which is she should have chosen Shapiro.
Should have chosen Shapiro.
The fact that I kept saying that you kept saying this over and over and over, she should have chosen Shapiro. I felt like that award should be the you were right. You were, and a lot of haters were like, Nate and Maria, stop talking about Shapiro. This will not matter. But it did matter. So I went outside of politics, sort of, and I said the worst fold was anyone who ended up selling Bitcoin at the beginning of the year during the bear market in January. I think that was the worst fold. Like the people who were, like all in on Bitcoin and then were like, you know what, I changed my mind. Like, this is bad. Like, it's down to 40K, like shit. I bet those people are not very happy right now. So I think that, and I don't think that I think that it was pretty obvious that they should not be folding, right? Because you know how cyclical this market is. You know how the bear bull cycles work. Like, if you know what you're doing, you do not sell like at a bottom right there. But yeah, so that's who I gave the worst fold of the year award to. So I think we can both give out one.
Next up, we have Cooler of the Year, who had a great hand but still lost.
So here I went outside of our usual purview, right? We're normally kind of very politics, business, some sports heavy. Here I decided to go to Hollywood, and I am giving this award to Greta Gerwig, who was the writer and director of Barbie, who just got completely shut out at the Oscars, losing everything, losing even some nominations. She wasn't even nominated for directing, and she lost for writing. And I think that she was just like she had a great hand. I think Barbie was a great movie that did incredibly well. And for some reason, she was just like completely shut out of the Oscars this year. That happens every year. There's always someone, but this one, I feel like, I felt a little bit personal about it because I think, she's female, she's talented, she's great. And I actually did not like Oppenheimer at all. I thought it was a horrible movie. I thought it was really boring. I did not think that it should have gotten all the awards it got. So I actually disagreed completely. This is from a personal thing, but these are our awards, so they get to be personal. That was my Cooler of the Year. How about you, Nate?
Maybe the New York Yankees, I don't know if you're a baseball fan, Juan Soto, this amazing young outfielder who is kind of like the Ted Williams of his era, signed with the crosstown rival New York Mets for almost $800 million. The Yankees offered him $760 million after making their first World Series run since 2009, I guess. Because apparently the Yankees were just cheap. Like George Costanza working for the Yankees and Seinfeld were like, they wouldn't give Juan Soto a suite. They apparently harassed his family and his driver. And so he was like, fuck you. I'm actually going to Steve Cohen in the New York Mets. Pretty rare to see a crosstown free agency move like that.
Oh, that's all right. Let's go for that. All right. Up next, Tilt of the Year. So what was the most emotional decision of the year, do you think?
I mean, I'm going back to politics here.
Yeah,
Joe Biden,
mine's
Biden,
politics too. Yep. Is yours?
Joe Biden deciding A, to run for re-election and that he was indefatigable, and then the pardon of fail son Hunter. Yeah,
I've got the pardon as mine. So let's unanimously give the Tilt of the Year to Biden for making some very emotional decisions. The deciding to run and the pardon of Hunter. I think that is absolutely. That was tilt. The definition of tilt is letting emotions into your decision process, right? That you are no longer evaluating things based on their, expected value, based on their actual kind of decision matrix. You are letting emotions that are incidental and not integral to the decision into the decision. And that's exactly what Joe Biden did.
GTO Call of the Year, Game Theory Optimalist Call for the most balanced, mathematically sound decision of the year.
Okay. So this one, I went outside of politics. I went into the business side because this is so incredibly rare. I wanted to kind of compliment Apple on abandoning their foray into electric vehicles, because most companies, after spending billions on something, don't have the foresight, the knowledge, kind of the perspicacity to say, you know what, we're not going to be competitive here. It's not working. We're just going to write it off and move on. And the market's rewarded Apple, actually, even though some people were like, this is insane. Like, right, how can you step away from a multi-billion-dollar investment? So I think that that is what GTO is, right? Is actually being able to make those types of really, really tough decisions, because you realize, you know what, it doesn't matter. We already spent that money, and we can't get it back. And if we realize we're not competitive, like, I'm going to fold my hand, right? And I'm going to walk away, and that's going to be okay. And most companies are not capable of doing that. Most CEOs are not capable of doing that. So I want to reward Apple for a really good decision.
Yeah, maybe I give it a little shout out here to Dan Campbell, the head coach of the Detroit Lions. The Lions nearly made their first Super Bowl ever. Blew it. That probably saved me. I don't want to even say how much it's going to save me on a Las Vegas Super Bowl trip. But Campbell's very aggressive about going for it on fourth down and making other aggressive play calls, which the GTO says is correct, and didn't work out, but they trust the system, and now the Lions are the best team in the NFL so far this year. So maybe I'll be spending my hard-earned dollars on a trip to New Orleans instead in the Super Bowl.
Great. I'm on board with that. All right. How about the Danny Kahneman Memorial Cognitive Bias of the Year Award? What cognitive bias best explains 2024? I got one for this. You got one for this? Or should I start?
You go first. And then
All right. So I'm going to say that the bias that best encapsulates 2024, and we're going back to politics here, is the sunk cost fallacy, which is the inability to walk away from sunk costs. And I think that the Biden campaign, which is something that is going to, we'll be feeling the repercussions of that for years to come, suffered from the sunk cost fallacy, right? The fact that, am already, I said I'm running, like I'm not going to turn back on it. I'm going to keep putting good time and good money after bad, after it was becoming more and more clear that he shouldn't run again, that he should step away. And the sunk cost fallacy, I think, literally cost them the election, because he did not step away. We've talked about this so many times, but, the fact that they didn't pivot, the fact that they kind of didn't take the risk and take on the new strategy and realize, you know what, we're only hurting ourselves by continuing to put good time, good money, good energy after bad. I think that was the death knell of this campaign. So to me, the sunk cost fallacy is the decision error that best encapsulates this year.
Yeah, maybe I'll go with good old fashioned groupthink. I suppose is like also contained to the Democratic Party, where an inability, like, I think it's fundamentally, I'm kind of writing an article about this now, I think it's kind of amazing that, and now we're getting a little bit of politics territory here, that Democrats adopt this philosophy where they kind of claim to be working on behalf of like all these oppressed minorities, and then all the oppressed minorities shift a long way toward Trump. And I think what that is that you're actually looking at views among other elites, and Democrats have kind of lost touch with how people outside their group think and what messages are appealing and which aren't. And so I don't want to detour this too much, but I'll kind of broadly give it to the Democratic Party and how capture among all the, cognitive elites actually can be a problem in some ways.
Makes sense.
Here's a fun one. Dgen of the Year. This is one of the most prestigious awards.
It is. Well, I'm giving it to Ipe Mizuhara.
Okay,
$17 million. I don't think it doesn't get more Dgen than him.
Can we call it the Ipe Mizuhara Memorial Dgen Award of the Year in the future? I think
in future years, I think that's what we need to call it. And for people, obviously, who can't immediately put that name to a face, that was Ohtani's interpreter, who pleaded guilty to making at least $17 million worth of sports bets gone wrong and using Ohtani's accounts to cover those.
And the knit of the year, do you have a good one for this?
Kamala Harris.
Okay, Kamala Harris. Yeah, these are two, the Kamala Harris Memorial. Yes, I got that one. She refused to distance herself from Biden, even though they couldn't campaign on Biden's agenda either. They just said, let's hope people ignore this. And yeah, the risk aversion in this campaign. And by the way, how much is this her versus her campaign managers, I'm not sure, but like it's
But
an
at the end
election.
of the
You're
day,
going to
it's
have a
her
lot of
campaign,
politics.
right? At the end of the day, it's her campaign. And if she disagrees with her campaign manager, she needs to be like, no, fuck this. I'm not going to be in it. So at the end of the day, it's on her, just like it's
Or
on the
vice versa. If the
CEOs.
campaign
Yeah.
disagrees with her, they're like, yo,
Yep.
you got to get your shit in gear, Kamala.
Exactly. So it seems like you agree with my Dgen and Knit of the Year picks.
Absolutely. These are pretty easy ones, I think. The Risky Business Bracelet, who had the better, which of the two hosts, this is an easy one because there are only two answers, had the better poker year.
I don't know, Nate. Are you up or down?
I'm definitely down in tournaments, and then I had
Okay.
a quite good year in cash, and so I don't actually know.
All right. Well, the bracelet, I think we should do tournaments, right? Since bracelets are
Yeah,
from
it's
tournaments.
verifiable, right?
Yeah.
It's
So,
verifiable.
yeah. So I'm up in tournaments, so I guess I get the bracelet for this year.
Yeah, I'm down a fair bit, and I'll need to have a good series here at the win. But the cash has gone. I'm starting to think of myself as more of a
That's great.
cash player in some
That's
ways.
wonderful.
Yeah.
And I look forward to seeing you on some big cash streams, and we can change
Invite
this
me.
from the bracelet award to something else, so that we can just say poker prowess, whether cash or tournaments. I don't know. Okay. So now we've got two awards that are being taken from another podcast, The Town, which gives awards the Mea Culpa I Was Wrong award and the Suck It Haters I Was Right award. So these are for, I think, personal decisions, personal things that we've done. This is where I said that you should be the Suck It Haters I Was Right. I didn't have one for me, but I had it for you, which was this: you should have gone for Shapiro.
Okay, yeah.
I think that you get that award. The Mea Culpa I Was Wrong award, I think that I was wrong when we had talked on the podcast about kind of how important crypto was to the election. And I'm like, it's a tiny percentage. It doesn't really matter. I actually think that it ended up mattering a lot more than I thought it would. And, and especially kind of given the amount of money that was donated, given kind of some people who I think came out and became single issue voters for Trump because of his take on crypto. I actually think I was a little bit wrong on that. I think I underestimated the crypto vote.
I'll give myself an award for nearly betting on with Keith Verboy, who was a venture capitalist, on the outcome in Florida, where Keith claimed, he lives in Miami now, very proudly so, that Kamala Harris would lose Florida by 8 points or more. And at the time, she was down only 3 points in the polling average. Got a spat on Twitter and offered to bet $100K. And actually kind of tried to facilitate this and sent an email to a mutual friend saying, hey, Keith, if you want to negotiate terms, here's person Y who can confirm this. And he didn't respond for 4 days, right? And then some morning, a New York Times poll comes out and has Harris down like 13 or 15 points in Florida. And I'm like, fuck this, you don't have a free option to make this bet whenever. So the offer is rescinded, which he agreed it was too late to accept the bet. So I guess maybe he kind of gets like a nit for missing out on what would have been a $100,000 return, but certainly not recognizing the complete collapse of the Democratic Party in Florida and getting lucky to be able to pull out of that bet.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. And the Suck It Haters I Was Right. Do you like my choice for that?
I have a lot. I mean, all the Biden related stuff. Like I actually wrote
You're like,
about
I was
how,
right about everything, haters.
I don't know. The Biden debate stuff where I'm like, actually the debate might go so bad
Yeah.
that he'll have to pull out. Like that was kind of crazy, right? I would not have given like more than like a 15% probability of that, but I kind of put myself out there with at least raising this chance. And so all the Biden stuff,
Yeah.
I felt like was my
You definitely
best
put yourself out there, and
takes of the year.
I think you ended up being right about a lot of it. So yes, I'm there for it. All right, now we're going to have two individual awards for us to give out. So mine is the Maria Konnikova Award for the biggest bluff of the year, and I am gonna get a lot of people mad for this one, but I'm giving it to Sam Altman and OpenAI for bluffing about the mission and the nonprofit nature of OpenAI, and getting, saying how it was all about, just being for the good of the world, and then raising money and saying, actually, we're going to be for profit, and all of this stuff that like obviously it was going to be a business and obviously like this is where it was heading. But I think a lot of people believed his initial bluff, and this is something that's going to be really important. And OpenAI and how Sam goes about it, I think this is an important thing to track closely. So I think it's good to realize that this is someone who is incredibly good at bluffing, incredibly credible at bluffing, and bluffs a lot. What do you think about that?
The Nate Silver, I agree. I think that's a great pick, Maria.
Thank you.
I mean, he is. I don't know if he's convincing everyone necessarily, but he knows how to see their bluff through. I'll say that much.
Yes, he does.
The Nate Silver Award for Rivarian of the Year. The Rivarian, of course, a term from my book for this group of, I don't know, degenerate gambling types. I think you have to give it to our boy Elon. I just think you have to. He made this very big bet where he was kind of in more of a blue-leaning cultural space and has obviously gotten like red-pilled in various ways. But look, he bet 250,000, or people are still counting, maybe it's 300. Excuse me. He bet like several $100 million of his own money on Trump. Went very all in on this movement, and now it's been rewarded with heading a government or a quasi-governmental agency named Doge, and getting this guy he wanted elected. It's a little bit like this thing we said before, where if you kind of make that hero call, and not like the odds were that bad. I mean, Biden was evidently in trouble very early on, but I think you have to like, and again, Elon is not my favorite representative of the river, right? Even if you were restricted to conservatives, someone like Jay Bhattacharya, who was an early Stanford professor who was skeptical of some of the COVID lockdown stuff, now named director of the NIH, like he is someone who I would personally like rather get a beer with or something. But Elon's the obvious choice. I'm not going to deny him his good year.
Yeah, I think that is a good choice. As you know, I'm not an Elon Musk fan, but yes, I think he did well.
We'll be back in just a minute to talk a little bit about how the poker is going so far and answer a listener question.
Nate, you are beautifully backlit by the lovely Wynn. So we are both in Las Vegas for the WPT. I've been playing a few more events than you. You came in and went straight into the $3K, $3,000 one-day event yesterday. How did that go?
Good. I finished 13th place for $10,000 or 9,900 something. I think technically, I don't know if it's for tax reasons or what they do it that way. Yeah, always great to start out with the decent sized cash in your first event. It was a very turbo event. If our listeners don't know what that means, it means that the blinds increase very fast. They start the event at 1. They're trying to get it wrapped up by 2 a.m. And with like 200 players or whatever, 250, I forget what it was, then that means you all of a sudden are playing for very high stakes relative to the amount of chips that you have. And so requires hitting some big hands early and then being aggressive and winning some coin flips, being aware of how the dynamics change in terms of, we've talked about ICM on this show before, where
yes, the independent
chip
model.
Independent chip model. The goal is to win money if you have a not just maximize your first place chances, right? And so I had a medium-sized stack, and I had to be a little bit cautious for parts of the tournament, which is kind of no fun. But that's I'm playing poker to win money, not to make friends and influence people. Well, maybe that too. So we were a little bit nitty at times. I'm wound up getting quite a few pay jumps to 13th place.
Yeah, well, that's important, especially because you were not in for one bullet. You were in for multiple bullets, right? So you needed...
Maria, you didn't have to, there's no record of that on Hand and Knob. Yeah.
All right.
2 bullets. I came in aggressively, as one tends to do on their first day in Las Vegas.
You were not in it. I just want people to know that you were not in it. Your first bullet was bluffed off. So you were, you put in a good show of not being in it first. And then you knitted it up.
I do think for like these one day, I mean, like, I think it is worthwhile to like look a little bit at like your life philosophy, right? And like what your alternatives are. Like, I don't want to like, look, if I bust out of the tournament before the dinner break, then my partner's in town, you're in town, can go get like a nice dinner somewhere and have a relaxing night in Vegas. And so like, I think there is something where like increasing your variance a little bit in the early stages where you get a big stack or not is a good life strategy. And also in this tournament, you kind of need a big stack or else you're just or else you're just, I mean, the blinds increase so fast that you're kind of have to play very defensively or get very lucky. And so I think it's actually worth, in like these one-day events, it's not a slow structure. It's worth kind of saying, I'm going to either have a big stack or go get some, go to a show or something fun.
Yeah. Go big or go home. I totally get it. But in all transparency, so the series has not started off well for me. I have played so far 3 events. So I played the opening $800 event, which was actually a $4,000 event for me. So people can do the math in terms of re-entries. I did not cash. Then I played the Mystery Bounty, which is a $1,600 event. Again, full transparency. It was only a $3,200 event for me. So that one I managed to sneak by with only 2 bullets, and I bubbled. Bubbling, once again, for people who don't know, is I busted very, very late in the night, basically when we were about to reach day 2 and the money. So that was not fun. And that was just a cooler hand. And I started the Prime, which is the $1,100 event yesterday. And I ended up busting, you can only rebuy once a day. So I busted both of my bullets yesterday, and I'm going to play again today. As soon as we finish recording our podcast, I'll make my way to the Win to see you, Nate, where we can both try to find a bag.
I'm gonna come in after lunch and maybe get a little looser. I
get a little
tomorrow.
lunch.
But there's lots of stuff. There's like the main 10K event starts next week, I guess.
This coming weekend.
Mm-hmm. There is a free roll for WPT
I did not
Gold
get a
Pass.
seat into the free roll, Nate. Did you?
Perhaps.
Nate! I did not win a seat into the free roll. And I'm not running well this series. So they have, if you enter, they have this promotion where you join, Club WPT Gold or whatever, kind of the same thing that the free roll is advertising. And then you get to draw from all of these possible prizes, including a McLaren, $250,000 car, and all of these other amazing prizes, including entry to the free roll. I drew a fucking hat, Nate. A hat.
Yeah.
And I had to be like, I'm sorry, you can keep the hat. I can't take a WPT hat.
I bought the hats are kind of expensive. They cost like $40 or something, Maria.
Nate, I should have given you the hat. I should have taken the hat. I didn't know. I didn't know. I turned my nose up at the hat. I was like, I got the lowest value prize. Oh, there were also cash prizes. You could go into this cash boost. There were so many good prizes, and I drew the hat. I am not running well this tournament series so far. Down almost $10,000 and a hat. Let's turn it around.
Look, let's turn it around. It happens. My second leg of the World Series this year. It's all kind of a blur. There was so much politics news, but just brick everything, right? So over, I forget what it was, over 12 or 13 or something probably, and that's very normal. It's the chances of that, if you do the math, they're like quite a bit higher than you might expect or want intuitively.
Absolutely. And I've had a very good year, so I'm not complaining. I just want people to realize that there is a lot of variance in this game. Just like in life, you go through these periods where, things just don't come together. And it's hard to forget that. It's hard to remember that when things are coming together, right? Like when you're running well, when you're cashing, you're like, oh, this is easy. Poker's easy. Life is great. Yeah. And I think that's true of life in general, right? When things are going well, you're like, yeah, this is good. This is how life should be. But you do go through periods when shit hits the fan, when things do not go as well as planned. But I hope I turn it around and that some of your 3K, success rubs off on me, so that after our meetup game tomorrow, I do not have to then go and play the Prime yet again, because this is a 1K event that's very worth playing the maximum amount of times, since it's probably the largest 1K event of the year. So it's exciting. It's an exciting series. I'm looking forward to the rest, and I'm looking forward to running a little bit better. And I hope both of us do. Let's take a listener question and talk about bilingualism. We had a listener named Ed, who had a question about language learning. So, should you learn a second language or not? And he maintains that as a primary English speaker, the EV for learning a second language is hugely negative, that it's a time suck, English is common, there's no obvious second language to learn that is better than any others. he talks about Spanish and Mandarin, that they're both commonly spoken, but how often will he go to a place where he'll only have that and no one to broker communications, doubly so with internet translation. So yeah, he just wants to know are there situations that make it marginally positive for a native English speaker, assuming you're not living with bilingual parents and getting your second language as a free?
What are your second language statuses, Maria?
Russian, French, Spanish, Italian, and Persian.
Jeez. Okay. So you clearly don't agree with the listener then.
No, I don't at all. I think that there's a ton of research on why you want to learn a second language that has nothing to do with, traveling over the world and having it be, basically how to communicate with people. That, I think, by the way, is incredibly important. I actually think it's great to be able to speak the language, at least a little bit of the place that you're visiting. It helps you appreciate it more. It helps you get a different experience. And you will, I like going off the beaten path, right? Like I like going to places that are kind of in the back alleys and like the local hidden places where oftentimes people don't speak English. And I think that you gain a lot from life for being able to speak the language. So I disagree with that, but that's a matter of, opinion, right? And I don't want to be like an obnoxious tourist, because if you think about it, basically everyone else in the world is bilingual and they've learned English to help the idiot Americans who refuse to learn a second language. Like if you meet someone from the Netherlands, they're going to speak English. If you meet someone from France, they're going to speak English. They I think are a lot richer for it, because they have acquired that second language. And I think that it's great to be able to do it, as well. But if we talk about the research, there are actually a ton of benefits for your brain, for learning more languages. But Nate, I was wondering, just before we get into that, do you have other languages, and kind of what's your just high level take on this?
No, I took Spanish in high school and learned just enough to pass out of my college Spanish requirement. So I can listen at like 40% comprehension and read at 60% comprehension, restaurant menu stuff. I mean, in general, as a foodie, I can read. I actually prefer to read, I'd rather see an Italian menu in Italian than English, because I trust my ability to know the original terms or translate more. But yeah, apart from that very limited basis, no, I am sympathetic to the research you're citing for a couple of reasons, right? One is I do think that if you look at large language models, they suggest that any given language, whether it's English or Spanish or French or Russian, or whether it's a computer language or mathematical language, is an incomplete representation of the kind of implicit, to sound pretentious, implicit vector space of human thought.
Yes.
And so having a wider, literal vocabulary that's not just English-based seems interesting. I mean, the analogy I sometimes make is there are poker concepts that are hard to translate if you haven't specifically played poker, right? The notion that if you're indifferent between two decisions, that small factors make a difference. I mean, it's kind of legible in English, but yeah, and sometimes if I'm thinking a lot about poker or programming or things like that, it feels like it's improving some other types of cognitive recognition, where if I'm really deep in doing some static coding or something. It's hard to know. I mean, the question is kind of what are the realistic trade-offs? I mean, maybe if you did learn a programming language, maybe you did learn a craft deeply. I think there is a lot of metaphors in art and literature that I think are probably somewhat parallel to language. Of course, you can read some of those texts easier if you have. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't know, where are you making a big bet or a small bet, right?
Right.
Should I, in my spare time, take Duolingo? So if we're at the EPT Paris next year, I can kind of make half sentences or not, right? Or should I go all in? I mean, where do you line up there?
Yeah, I think that that's a very personal decision. But I think, so one of the things you mentioned, I think there is a lot of work on, which is that our views of the world really are expanded by having the proper vocabulary for it, right? Like being able to express your thoughts, emotions, kind of having words for things actually helps you, figure out what they are, helps you think more rationally, more logically, make better decisions. And sometimes I have a Russian word for something that doesn't exist in English. And it's a nuance, it's a distinction that I wouldn't otherwise have. And we know that this is true of like just physical perception of the world, right? People who are artists, who have a larger palette of colors and know all the different hues, they actually are able to distinguish more colors when you give them kind of a color wheel, where someone might be like, oh, I see red and green. They actually see more colors, right? Like their visual experience is different because they know what the words are. And different languages have different words for things. And I think that's really important. I think that that's actually really cool. Like I love these learning kind of even languages I don't know, learning words to express certain concepts, certain states, certain parts of the world. But there are also other benefits beyond that. So first, cognitive control, which is executive control, which is really important, is better in bilinguals. All of those cognitive functions tend to be enhanced by having kind of the control to switch between languages, right? Having all these different things coexist in your mind, especially if you learn it young. But right now, let's not talk about that because that's not what the question is, right? He actually tries to exclude people who had it as a freebie. So like Russian for me is a freebie, but English is not. I actually grew up monolingual just speaking Russian. I learned English in school when I was already, when I was 5 years old. So it wasn't quite a freebie, but I was still a little kid. So let's just call it a freebie. And then
so
the other languages.
When you hear Russian guys discussing poker at the table, do they assume you don't know what they're saying?
Oh, sometimes when they don't, it's amazing because they'll say horrible things about me, assumptions about me, or things about their hand. And I've actually learned a lot of information. More and more people realize I speak Russian these days, but a lot of people still don't know. Yeah, so that is a lot of fun. But the other thing that I think that our listener would be very interested in knowing is that it seems like people who speak more languages actually age a lot better and their brains are protected a lot longer and more strongly from dementia and cognitive decline. So on average, people who are bilingual or more, but let's just say bilingual, if they experience signs of cognitive decline over 4 years later than people who aren't. That's huge, right? Like think about that. Like
so how do we know this is not just selecting for higher socioeconomic status and or education?
So these studies are pretty well done with those types of controls, right? So that's super easy to control for. You put in a control for socioeconomic status and you see, does this still have an effect? And in general, it seems like it does. Now this work is preliminary, like all of these types of things are incredibly difficult, right? These are really, really hard things to study. So we have a good sense that this might matter. And we know that, with dementia where you actually see Alzheimer's, where you can see kind of the plaques, et cetera. And then you can just see like, when did people, after they die, like when did they start exhibiting signs? You end up seeing that people who are bilingual exhibit signs much later. So they're able to kind of compensate, right? Because you have different parts of your brain. You're able to compensate for the loss in a much better way. And I think that that's really interesting. Oftentimes there's a lot of clinical evidence, and it's quite interesting. But when you have a stroke, when something goes really wrong in your brain, oftentimes people who are bilingual switch, like you forget one language, but you retain the other somehow. It's really cool. Yeah, there's some really, really cool stuff where your brain is much more flexible and you have much more cognitive capacity to deal with bad shit happening. And I think that that's something that everyone should want, right? Like you want to think and be sharper and have kind of those reserves for as long as possible. So to me, it's just an absolute no-brainer for no pun intended for a lot of reasons. But I think that all of these different areas of research are really interesting.
Maria, since we both have some poker to play, and in my case also lunch to eat, do you want to wrap up there?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I hope, dear Ed, that we've convinced you to learn a second language, that it is actually plus EV for you for a number of reasons, even though most people you encounter will be able to speak English.
If you have a listener question, dear listener, email us at Risky Business, all one word, at pushkin.fm, and maybe you will have the chance to be on the air and to let us have some fun with your question instead.